Hello, FDFT members. It's so wonderful to see you at our 2021 annual meeting. I'm Caitlin Dreswicki, and as you can see, I'm the outgoing board chair. I'm going to take on the chair position for about 45 more minutes, and then we'll hand it off to a wonderful group of people and a wonderful person to take over the chair position. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's a little weird again to be doing this, as we know, but I'm so thrilled that everyone is here and I'm able to share some great things that we did throughout the year as a member base and as a board. So before we truly begin, I do want to give my heartfelt thank you to everyone at the DIA and the DFT and all of my fellow board members for letting me be the board chair. It was a wild ride and it was a lot of fun. It was my first time doing anything like this, and the DIA staff handled all of my questions with grace and ease, and they really helped me along, and I'll be forever grateful for that. So thank you very much. All right, now to get into the nitty-gritty of the 2021 year. So it's been another year where we started off in the virtual capacity. We're still doing the virtual screenings, but we were able to open the theater doors. Elliot will be here to talk a little bit more about the programming and about being in the physical space of our wonderful theater. We also did a couple other things as far as a board, as far as motions were made. We were able to support the virtual capacity and the software platform with a motion of $15,000. And we also, because of the year that we had, the board was in a financial position, and more on that later, was in a position to be able to support the budget year and a financial gap that the DFT had. So we were able to move some funds from our general fund to then support that gap. And we also were able to go through some of the maintenance aspects that we always talk about as far as maintaining the integrity and the beauty of the physical space in the theater. The door projects were completed, stage doors, and we remember talking about this in previous meetings. They were fixed this year, and now when as the theater reopened, doors are now safer, everything's quieter and now warmer as we get into the colder months. So those are some of the items that we did this past year. And again, a lot of our work was really meant and was done by building the board transition. So we had a lot of meetings talking about who might be taking over, who's interested in doing so, and how we're going to make that transition happen. So that was a lot of our year was taking over, and I'm really, really thrilled to introduce some of the incoming board officers. May I introduce the new incoming board chair, Jenny Callens. The vice chair, Liz Tentinelli. Our new treasurer, Nina Barlow Glover. And our new secretary, Erica McKinnon. I'm not sure if Erica is able to join us this evening, but we do have Erica McKinnon joining us as a secretary. And I couldn't be more thrilled for the officers to support the members, and also the members, you are in for a real treat. So many ideas have been flowing around, and the conversations that have already been going on between all of the incoming board officers has been really phenomenal. And I'm really looking forward to attending some of the events that they're going to put on and hearing about all the great things that are happening in the future. So thank you so much for taking on the positions that you're taking on. And that's it. Thank you so much.
So, Caitlin, would you go ahead and mute? So I think I'm getting feedback. There we go. I want to take a minute to recognize Caitlin. It is really a challenge to be chair, and I can imagine that being chair during a pandemic is even more challenging. Caitlin handled it with grace. Caitlin's been involved at the Friends of the Detroit Film Theater Auxiliary as chair since 2016. Which is really incredible. She has worked so hard. So I would like to ask my fellow board members who are dialed in. I would be really interested if someone were willing to move that we recognize Caitlin's leadership by honoring her with a chair, at the Detroit Film Theater. You all members, you may all know that you can sponsor a chair at the Detroit Film Theater, and then it has a little plate on it with the name or inscription. And so I think that we as a board should recognize Caitlin by sponsoring a chair in her honor. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I'd like to make that motion.
Liz, thank you so much. Would anyone like to second the motion? I saw Nina raise her hand to second the motion, so I'm just going to ask board members who are present if they would vote in favor of honoring Caitlin with a chair. So I think we'll just do it with a show of hands, because I see Bill there, and under Erica's name, that's actually Bill. And Erica's probably on her way, so we'll wait and let Erica show her name as well, or show her hand as well. Okay, so we're voting to see if we honor Caitlin with by sponsoring a chair in her honor at the Detroit Film Theater. So show of hands, board members. Excellent. Thank you so much. So Caitlin, it's our honor to honor you. So thank you so much. And I would clap, but that would probably make the sounds go crazy. So thank you.
That is so overwhelming and so kind. Thank you very much. I can't wait to be in the theater with all of you. And hopefully all of our seats are close to one another. So thank you. Thank you so much. So I would like to continue on. I mean, I could say thank you a million times, and I want to, but I'll continue on with the rest of the details of the annual meeting. So thank you so much, incoming board chairs. I'm thank you. So the new board officers are coming in with a really wonderful membership base. Now, albeit we've had a year where we've seen a drop of our membership, and that's not unusual for nonprofits or different arts organizations, or really any other organization throughout the past couple of years, where the membership is what number we were at. We were in the thousands at some point at a couple years ago. And now our membership base is holding strong and steady for the past year at a number of 375. And that's a number that we saw it drop last year to around that number. And I've seen a little bit of an incline or increase in the past couple of months, which is really phenomenal. So thank you to everyone for supporting the DFT and your continued support. It's really giving us a position to be able to do everything that I mentioned earlier, as far as fixing seats and making sure that we're ADA accessible, and making sure that we're able to support the DFT when in times of need. So the membership base is a big part of that. And while I see a drop in the numbers, I don't see a drop in the financial aspect of it. So you're truly supporting and doing so much to make sure that the DFT stays an important part of the arts community here in Detroit and Metro Detroit. So thank you. And I don't believe our outgoing treasurer is in the house right now. So I'm going to deliver his financial report. That's Lamont Buffington. I thank him for being a wonderful treasurer and a wonderful support system for me too. So as of October 31st, 2021, our FDFT general fund is at $300,788.94. Our seat fund is at $28,415.48. And that brings our total to $329,204.42. Last year, we were at a number hovering around the 200,000. So I will say that the support is overwhelming and incredible. So thank you very much. And I look forward to the year of rebuilding the membership base. And I know that the incoming officers are going to do a fantastic job with that. And we're going to have many member events coming forward. I'm saying that, and I know it's going to happen. And now I know we want to talk about the programming element and what Elliot's been doing throughout the year as far as programming in the virtual capacity, and then also the exciting moments of opening the physical space in the theater and how it is to program both right now. Right now, Elliot's programming both the virtual screening room and also the Detroit Film Theater, the physical screening room. So I'm really curious to hear how he's balancing all of that. And I want him to share that with the membership base as well, because I know you're curious too. Hello, Elliot. Oh,
Unmute myself. Yes, I am going to unmute myself. It's great to see you as always, and in person relatively soon, I hope. But yeah, speaking of balancing things, that's always difficult for me. I'm a little unbalanced in many ways, and the thing that I realized during all of this time, like a lot of the people who attend the DFT, is how dependent we are on the movie going experience. As a programmer for the Detroit Film Theater, there were some interesting symmetrical experiences that happened. I'll cut to one right now because I'll forget it, since every talk I give is completely unprepared and I have no idea where I'm going to end up. So here we are back in January of 1974 when the Detroit Film Theater first opened its doors, with a French Canadian film. We had something like 12 inches of snow. At the time, we thought, boy, that's a disaster. We didn't know what disasters really were, but it was just a little bit of ordinary snow, a little more than normal. And at that moment, we didn't know if we were going to continue being a film program or not. We had a little bit of money to start. You might remember it was a $10,000. Well, you won't actually physically remember, but you might have read about it someplace. We had a $10,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. And they said, this is all the money you're going to get. And if you sell enough tickets during the year, you might be able to sustain the program. But we're not going to be here to help you anymore. So we didn't know what was going to happen. And on that first night, we had 874 people come to see the French Canadian film, Mon Oncle Antoine. Pessimist that I am, I thought, well, that's the end of it. They all came to this one and they won't come to anything else. That didn't happen. But the interesting thing, 47 plus close to 48 years later, is that we had, like just about every movie theater in the world, an extended shutdown period, which we weren't anticipating and wasn't due to financial instability. But we also I didn't know what was going to happen when we reopened. We kind of wanted it to be business as usual. Nothing is business as usual now, but when we reopened the theater on the weekend of October the 15th with a documentary called The Velvet Underground by Todd Haynes, which just made the New York Times 10 Best of the Year list, by the way. So I was excited about that too. We had 894 people, 20 more than we had during the snowstorm of 1974. And to have that many, and I spoke with the film's distributor because I thought this is odd. I wasn't sure what to expect. 15 people or 1,000 people. It was closer to the 1,000 mark, and it turns out that the film, of course, The Velvet Underground, being a New York band and it being a New York story and a New York style documentary, was a huge hit in New York City. But the second biggest weekend that the movie had in the United States was at the Detroit Film Theater on that weekend of October 15th, which I thought was pretty breathtaking, considering that we had been away so long, considering the atmosphere of anxiety about movie going that was surrounding movie going. Did our audience move out of the country? Were they no longer interested in the cinema experience? And it just so happened that that film was something that was also going to be streaming on one of the commercial streaming services that very weekend. And we knew this, but we thought, let's see how we fare with a big screen presentation, because that's what we've all been missing. So, long story short, people were glad that we were back, and we were glad to see them. And for the 8 subsequent weeks, we have continued to draw audiences that are approximately the size of the audiences we were drawing pre-pandemic, which, considering the COVID protocols that are in place and the obstacles people have to watching movies the way they may have remembered them, is a great feeling, because there are, I can't even tell you how many. There are so many great films out right now, available right now, that we tried to keep up with virtual showings during that 18 or 19 months. But the programming was, in my experience, and I'm not going to tell my whole life story here, but just a little bit of time, was a completely different experience, because I felt that we were trying to tread water, but in a good way. We were trying to keep up with the flow of good films, but we were presenting them in a way that we were completely not used to. We always had a physical brochure that tells people what we're showing and when we're showing it, and it became kind of our DNA. And getting the word out to people online was just as much of a challenge as showing films to people online. But we wanted to make sure that we had that connection with cinema that was current, cinema that was restored and classic, and that we were going to be able to offer it somehow to people. This was something that was happening all over the country. Theaters like ours, um, and of course, there's no theater quite like ours, thanks to Friends of Detroit Film Theater and all the work that they do and all the work that you have done during your tenure, which we cannot thank you for enough. We wanted to make sure that people had the opportunity to stay in touch with films. One of those in particular was a Detroit tradition. It's a worldwide tradition, I guess, but in Detroit, we're the number one engagement in the country of the Academy Award nominated short films. This year, we weren't able to show them in the theater. Very few people were able to show them in theaters, but we did show them online. And our online showings were at about 50% of the number of people that we showed these films to when we packed the DFT every night, which has 1,050 seats. Now, having half as many might seem odd, but it's really not half as many, because you discover all these strange things with a virtual world. When we sell a ticket to people, we know a person bought a ticket to see the film. When you sell a virtual ticket to someone, you can't go around counting the number of people who are in their living room. We hoped it was a lot. We hoped a lot of people were exposed to those films and got to see them during the virtual showings. So all in all, it was probably close to what we normally were able to do. But when you don't hear people laughing, when you don't hear the applause, when you don't hear the gasp, when you don't hear, as happens in some of the live action shorts that are particularly grueling, because they're always about difficult subjects that might not, an important subject that might not make it into commercial movie theaters. I miss people walking out indignantly, or walking out into the lobby and looking like they're going to break into a faint because they're having such a strong reaction. It's it's the thing that you miss the most, at least as an exhibitor, to hear an audience, to feel an audience, because audiences respond differently at every performance of a film. It is like a living thing. Um, that's the thing, more than numbers, more than dollars through the door, more than anything, that we missed. And the experience of seeing great films virtually on a laptop, um, as compared to the experience of seeing them now again in the theater. What I can tell you from being in the room for the last 8 weeks is that people are happy to be there. They are happy to be among others who want the experience, who missed the experience, and it's turning into a new kind of weekly ritual, in a sense, for a lot of folks, many of whom were a regular audience prior to the pandemic, and quite a number of whom are just discovering DFT now as the world begins to sort of poke out of its little hiding place and look around, thanks to the vaccines which are available and which is one of the requirements of our COVID protocols at the theater. It also happens to be something that many of our regular audience have told us is allowing them to feel safe about going to this space and experiencing films. That plus the social distancing. If you're ever worried about being crowded at the DFT, you don't have to now. You can sit in the balcony and have a good portion of it to yourself. It's great. It's like a perfect time in one way for moviegoers to go to the DFT and be able to stretch out and enjoy a film. But it's been, for this last 2 months, a real joy and a revelation to me that there were occasions in which I thought, well, it's becoming routine. I know a good film when I see one, and I book it and I show it to the audience, and I'll do it again the following week. But as you and I both know, about everything that's happened during the pandemic, you don't know how much you treasure something, even something simple like going to a movie. You don't know how much you treasure it until you don't have it.
Right.
And we are aware that at any moment things could happen that will change the current situation. But obviously, I hope not. And we are planning that's not going to happen. We are planning that we are going to be here and we're going to stay here. And that has resulted in my booking a new season that my anxiety right now is there are 4 distributors I have to speak with tomorrow who are offering great films to us, and
Mhm.
we can't play them because our dance card is almost full through early May. The problem with showing the virtual films is that they came at you like this, and take
Right.
it, don't take it, or it's going to go on a streaming service and this and that. But now that luxury of having the time to plan a schedule that makes sense and a different experience each week for people to enjoy, I'm reminded that there is rhyme and reason to putting together a program that people want to return to
Right.
week after week.
Right.
So it feels like a privilege and a pleasure for me. And I get to once again, instead of whining about, gosh, this was a great film I saw on my laptop, I can only imagine how great it would look at the DFT and how audiences would love it. Some films I have saved for almost 2 years now, including one that's going to begin the next brochure, which is for a season that begins the 3rd week in January. It's a movie that I saw almost 2 years ago now, a Russian film called The Whaler Boy that won a prize at the Venice Film Festival a couple of years ago and is probably going to go out in a virtual form at some point early next year. There's an image from that wonderful movie. It's an intimate story about a young kid who lives in an area of Russia where he could probably see Sarah Palin's house, and put it that way. He's very close, almost as close as you can get to the coast of the United States, living on the Bering Straits. But he's a very lonely kid. He's a 15-year-old kid, and he's got all the puberty issues and all kinds of problems. But he's got the internet, and he's got a laptop. And one of the things he does on his laptop, like I guess a lot of 15-year-olds, is he looks at porn or semi-porn uh, as he sits there along the Bering Straits, freezing and wondering what the rest of the world might look like. And as he's watching his favorite actor or dancer, actually, in in his little hut one evening, uh, a note pops up at the bottom of the screen. I'm not going to do a whole spoiler, believe me, but a note pops up at the bottom of the screen and it says, "Write to me. I live in area code 48202, Detroit, Michigan." And I almost fell off my chair in the living room where I was watching this on my laptop. And sure enough, the rest of the film, he Googles Detroit and he starts looking at images around Detroit, including the area around the DIA. And he says to his friend in Russian, "I've got to go there and meet her." He's sure that he's going to be able to. So the second portion of the film is this kid's pilgrimage to try to get to Alaska and try to, as he thinks he can, walk to Detroit to meet his dream girl. The Whaler Boy is always surprising. It's always clever, and ultimately, it is so moving in a sweet way, an unexpected way, that it became one of the joys of my virtual movie going experiences over the last couple of years. And I kept thinking people seeing this at the DFT would go nuts. They will love this film. I can't believe that's not going to happen. We waited and waited and waited and waited. And there was a moment in which they decided that it might not be commercial enough. It might go straight to a streaming service. But they made a copy of the film for us.
Oh,
And
great.
it's going to premiere. Its American theatrical premiere is going to be at the DFT in February.
I'm
And
I'm amazed. I swear I heard you talk about this film. I want to say the 2019 annual meeting. I don't know. I mean, I'm really excited to see it because I haven't, just from the past, I haven't been able to see it or get my hands on it. So I'm really
I
looking
know
forward to it.
I get too excited about too many movies, but one of the great things now is that I feel that I don't have to, that the expression, you don't want to get your hopes up. I would see great films and say, I'm going to show this to DFT. This is all going to be over. People are going to be able to go to the movies again. And at a certain point, I kind of almost stopped getting my hopes up. And then when I realized we were going to be able to reopen, my hopes did more than come up. I became ecstatic about all of the things that were out there, including I would call it a new Iranian film, except it was made in 1976, film called Chess of the Wind. Some people might have read about it already because it opened in New York and got rave reviews. This is one of the many films, and we showed many of these in the early to mid 1970s that were made before the Iranian Revolution about the unrest and corruption that existed prior to the revolution in Iran. And this one is about a family that is more than corrupt, but they are used as a kind of a metaphorical soap opera about the lack of humanity and the greed that can take over in an unregulated and corrupt society. And it's also a horror movie, and
Ooh.
it's also a mystery, and it's also thrilling, and it also is physically fantastic. This movie was only shown once publicly before it was banned, and it was assumed up until about 5 years ago that it didn't exist anymore. But thanks to the efforts of a lot of great restoration organizations, including the Cinema Ritrovato people in Bologna, Italy, Chess of the Wind has been restored, and it's fantastic. I'll just mention one quickly, a new film that hasn't opened anywhere in the United States yet, but will be opening shortly, called The Velvet Queen. This is a documentary set in Tibet about a wildlife photographer, a real guy named Vincent Munier, and he's hunting in Tibet for what is really one of the most elusive subjects for a photographer, and that's the snow leopard.
Hmm.
And the film becomes a photographic hunt, but it also is a celebration of having a big, huge, widescreen back again, when we can see parts of the world that we might get to someday, but even if we do, somehow some things look even more astonishing and jaw-dropping when we see them at the movies, when we see them through the eye of a
Mhm.
great cinematographer and a great crew of documentarians. And The Velvet Queen, which is the name of the film, is one of those that is truly deserving of the word jaw-dropping. Maybe that's two words, but the phrase
We'll take it.
jaw-dropping. Yeah. So that, in addition to, of course, the Academy Award nominated short films, those are just a couple of the films I'm going to mention now, a few of the films I'm going to mention now that um, I think audiences will really be excited to see on the big screen.
We did have a question about the British Arrows.
Yes, the British Arrows had to take a hiatus. They didn't. We had to take a hiatus from presenting them. We
Okay.
didn't want to do that. We loved them
Mhm.
and wanted to keep it going. The timing didn't work out perfectly, but we are absolutely determined to bring them back in December of next year
Okay.
for in-person screenings in the theater. And it's funny, you reminded me of something else, and I won't ramble on forever. I promise. I'll stop in a second. But what's coming up shortly, still on the current DFT schedule, is an event that we actually presented online a year ago. And it was because online was the only way to do it. But the great Hong Kong director Wong Kar-wai
Yeah.
supervised himself the restoration of a number of his films, among them masterpieces like the film you're looking at an image from now, In the Mood for Love, from the year 2000. That, by the way, was a film that I remember seeing at a press and industry screening at the Toronto International Film Festival in the year 2000. And I thought it was a beautiful movie, but for some reason, I didn't feel connected to it. And sometimes that can happen at a festival when you're going from one, Caitlin.
Yeah.
I was just see you
Tired.
at the
People.
Toronto Film
Right.
Festival, and assume I still you rush from one to the other, and there may be a mood shift that is too dramatic,
Mhm.
and you may still be on a high from something else or a low from something else. But I kept thinking about this movie, and I went back to see In the Mood for Love as soon as I could, second time, and I realized it's one of the most magnificent things I've ever seen, as is so much of Wong Kar-wai's work, and so much of it is different. The formalism of In the Mood for Love is breathtaking, and the spontaneity and fun of a film like Chungking Express is incomparable. But what they all have in common, all of his movies, all of his best films certainly, is that they're best seen on the big screen.
Right.
And he worked so hard on getting these restorations made, and then theaters shut down. We showed 7 of his films online last fall in these restorations, but you couldn't really tell what they looked like. So coming up in a couple of weeks, we're going to be able to show 4 of those restorations in absolutely pristine, ultra high definition 4K shape
I always
over the course
celebrate
of.
Yeah, I always celebrate my birthday at the DFT. It's coming up, it's in January, and I'm pretty sure In the Mood for Love is the weekend that I'm gonna be there celebrating
Well,
my birthday. So I'll
yeah,
see everybody
It's gonna be January 9th. So, we want you there. You'll have your own chair to sit in and
then. Yay.
watch the film and enjoy. But that's one of the problems and joys of having one screen, one big screen. I would
Mhm.
have liked to have brought all the films we showed virtually back to the theater so that people could see them on the big screen. But the Wong Kar-wai films were a must.
Mhm.
And for the holidays, we're doing the restored version of Jean Cocteau's great 1946 Beauty and the Beast.
Oh,
There he is, Jean Marais, when he lost his beast makeup and turned into just plain old ordinary movie idol Jean Marais.
mhm.
At the end of the film, Greta Garbo was reputed to have screamed in the theater where she saw it, "Give me back my beast." It's it's an extraordinary performance and one of the most beautiful, um, just sheerly beautiful movies ever made, but also one of the great childhood experiences. And yet it's made clearly for adults as well as kids. It's magical. And Cocteau proves in this film what he said all along. The only thing he wanted from art, the only thing he wanted from the movies was to answer the hope that every moviegoer has, which is astonish me. And he does it. So that's going to be a holiday presentation. We're showing it, it's the day after Christmas, if I'm not mistaken. And also, we're showing it on New Year's Eve day in the afternoon. So it's like a kid in a candy store for me to find out what I want to put up on the big screen next to keep the balance of the new and the classic going, and to bring that joy that movies can bring, to audiences who have been uh, stifled and shut up. It's not like we haven't had film entertainment to
Right.
watch. There's reams of it,
Mhm.
but there's also perhaps too much of it. And to be able to look at one thing at a time and to see it right, and to have other people to see it with,
Right.
feels now like the luxury it always really was, but that we always took for granted. So welcome back, DFT, and welcome back, DFT, because of the people who supported us, whether silently through the pandemic, which is unfortunately still continuing, or saw some of the films we presented virtually during the pandemic, or who supported us as members of
Mhm.
Friends of Detroit Film Theater, based on the good faith that that we always believed we would be back, and to justify their faith in us. So the board, the general membership, and everybody who's been coming to the DFT, particularly in these last 8 weeks, thank you, because you're providing a gift for yourselves, and as far as I'm concerned, for generations who are going to be inspired by the images that they see on the screen, whether it's to go into filmmaking, brain surgery, or psychiatry, which is probably the principal profession that results from seeing too many movies. But it's it's
Impossible.
um, it's happy to be practicing our craft again, and to everybody at the DIA, on every level, at the DIA, where so many museums during this time shut not only shut things down, but also took the time to discard things that
Right.
they didn't consider significant. The cinema as an art form um, prevailed through this time, and it was considered to be a priority. And for that, audiences and all of us who put on the Detroit Film Theater will be eternally grateful.
Well, the upcoming selections that you've programmed, curated are astonishing. So I'm really excited for the program that you've been putting together the last few weeks. You can tell you're revived, and we're also appreciative of you for doing the work that you do. And we're
Well, one thing people can be happy about, Caitlin, is that when I make announcements on stage with a mask on, um, I find I much shorter in my speeches and my rants prior to movies starting. So if people are thinking I'm going to be doing this before every film they see, they can relax.
No one said anything about that, Elliot. That was all you. It's all in your head.
I have many conversations with myself, day in and day out.
Well, thank you so much. Really, this is this. I'm really, really looking forward to visiting you at the theater soon. So, The questions, if there's any more questions, please do share right now in Facebook or YouTube comment section. We did get a couple, and we touched on them, but it's really nice to hear your approach. Obviously, we want everything that you've got, Elliot, and I know it's a lot when we're talking about the virtual element and how many films were coming in through down the pipeline from all the distributors just throwing out the virtual films. It's like, how much can you give the audience, and how much are people actually, engaging with what you're doing? It's no easy task. So
And it was too much. It was too much to constantly be bringing things that you couldn't really. I shouldn't say we couldn't distinguish, one film from the next, but the curation aspect of being able to make a special presentation for an audience in a theater of a new and different film or restoration every week, I found is a very different experience
Right.
from the streaming
Right.
world. Even though we tried to replicate what we did at the DFT live in a virtual world, it's not the same thing.
Right.
And I learned a lot about why I had certain misgivings about streaming services. I find them, very useful, wonderful to have, and I never have anything against them. But it's like some misgivings that I had, for many years about multiplexes, about theaters that were showing, 20 movies at a time, and I know what I want to see, so I'm going to make it a beeline. But the idea of replacing a curated regular bit of programming with an avalanche of material, it's not always an improvement on the experience that makes things special,
Right.
that makes movie going special, or festival going, or
Right.
repertory theater going, or art house theater going. And you can't really put your finger on that until suddenly you have to do things differently. So it's been a very interesting experiment, not just for me, but for the audiences, for all of our audiences everywhere.
I do know the DFT has had its fair share of wonderful visitors, and not just our wonderful membership base, but I know we've had a few other visitors. A question that we just got was, who are some of your favorite visitors from the DFT? Do you have any people that have, particularly, excited you,
Oh, the
perhaps?
people I've
Or
met over the years, for Detroit is not considered to be the stop that people have to make when doing junkets or
right.
touring around. And there have been so many people over the decades who I've gotten to meet at the DFT, who have come with a film, come to give a talk, or just shown up, like Ian McShane did. And this was after I watched, him in Deadwood, and just loved his performance so much. And, one day there he is walking around the building, and he ended up giving us a gift, giving us a monetary contribution because he loved what we did. Yeah, meeting Robert De Niro was fun. Spending time with Robert Duvall was fun. Meeting Stanley Donen and Milos Forman, and so many people. But it's funny you mentioned it. There were some people I've always wanted to meet, and some of the great modern filmmakers. My God, I mean, Stanley Nelson,
Oh,
who was at the DFT a couple of times. Spike Lee. Spike Lee came and presented recently the Detroit premiere of The Black Klansman, and I sat with him, and I never saw anybody in my life so wired to the sound system, the projection, everything that was happening. He was so concerned with the exhibition of what was going on, and had been to the DFT years before with his film Bamboozled, and watched a full house, and told me that the projection was the greatest. The audience was the greatest he had ever seen for one of his films. He was going to stay for a couple of minutes, make sure the projection was okay. He stood in the back of aisle 2 for the entire 2 hours
Oh my gosh.
because he said he couldn't resist
Yeah.
the way audiences were responding. And film scholars, people like A.O. Scott visited and gave a talk at the DFT not that long ago. Eddie Muller, who's a real expert in his field, and a couple of Detroiters. Piper Laurie came to talk about her life, being born in Detroit, and ultimately going to Hollywood and finding fame in films like The Hustler, starring opposite Paul Newman, and being killed by kitchen implements that were telekinetically transported to every part of her body by Sissy Spacek
Oh.
in Carrie, the Brian De Palma film, and working for David Lynch in Twin Peaks. Piper Laurie was an absolute delight to talk to and to interview on stage. But in your life, if you love a particular thing, there's always somebody you want to meet, even though it might just mean saying, "Hi, I admire your work," because ultimately, I and everybody who does anything like me, we're fans.
Right.
We're movie fans. And there were two people I always wanted to meet. One was Alfred Hitchcock, and of course, I never got to meet him. He died on me before I got to meet Alfred Hitchcock.
Wow.
I'd met King Vidor. I bought a Coke for Fay Ray at the at the Telluride Film Festival when she was there for a tribute to King Kong. I've sort of have met everybody until there was one person who I thought, gee, I know I'm going to meet him. I keep inviting him to come to Detroit because he was born in Detroit. And that was Francis Ford Coppola,
Yeah.
one of the greatest living
Yeah.
filmmakers, and I think one of the greatest American movie makers, who was born at Ford Hospital, just off Grand Boulevard. That's how he got his middle name. One day, thanks to an amazing person who works at the DIA and met Francis at a wine event in Detroit that he had come to because he's very proud of his wines. That was Kate Lowerman, and it turns out it's the only time I've ever been grateful for Donald Trump, or at least, well, I wouldn't even say grateful, but nevertheless, Francis Coppola was at this wine event in the Detroit area, and it turns out that he was going to be delayed getting out of town because his plane, which was the former Willow Run Airport, couldn't take off because Trump's plane was there. So the whole airport was on a lockdown.
Yeah.
And Kate, bless her heart, said to Francis, "Hey, you got a couple hours? We were talking about the DFT, the theater." He says, "Yeah, I know it real well. You guys premiered One from the Heart. We were one of the only theaters in the world that showed One from the Heart." And he knew about the theater, and he heard about it from sources, many sources. She said, "You got time to go." And he couldn't think of a reason to not do it.
Right.
And sure enough, 20 minutes later, in a limo, this was 2017,
Wow.
out pops a guy who looked amazingly like Francis Ford Coppola, because he was. And he came in the theater, and we spent about 45 minutes together. And our great projectionist, Jody Hulemantel, was there as well. Got to meet Francis.
Wow.
And he wanted to talk about the theater. He is talking about doing some stage productions, and we talked about his restoration of the Cotton Club, which we got to show as one of the very last movies we had on screen just prior to the pandemic shutting down everything. And I was really glad we got special permission from the film's distributor. It only had something like 5 theatrical engagements in this country to show his recut version of a film he's extremely fond of. But to hear him talking about what he does, how he does it, about Detroit, and about cars. He made the film about Preston Tucker, and he always kind of loves the auto industry and had a thing for Detroit. But he said, I never got back here enough.
Yeah.
After a while, he sort of didn't you could tell he didn't want to leave. We were in an empty theater talking about films. We never talked about The Godfather. Amazing, but true. And I remember, don't do any lines from The
Don't ask.
Godfather,
Yeah.
you know, right. And it was a pleasant experience. And I felt also like I had been, the things were partly fulfilled. It's always, as you know, I mean, it's one of the reasons I love movies. It's always a danger to meet in real life the people who you idolize, because 9 times out of 10, it's something that I wish I'd never met that person. What a jerk. The films are great, but so often that's not the case in the film world that we live in.
Right.
There are wonderful people, and sometimes they just love the opportunity to talk about the things that they love as well. So yeah, that picture is one of my little treasures, because it shows our theater, and it shows a wonderful guy who was born just down the street, who turned out to be one of our great national treasures.
I would say,
And of course, a lot of the people who went to the DFT as kids, people like Sam Raimi. I mean, so many people who have seen films and been moved by them. It's hard to not turn into, Grandpa Simpson and just start talking incoherently about nostalgic stuff. So I'm going to stop doing it.
I was gonna say, those are, in that picture, there were 2 national treasures in there, Elliot. So thank you very much. I think we're about at time for the annual meeting. No,
there can't be anybody left.
No. I'm sure there are. The stories are great, and it's always wonderful to talk with you and to remember why I love the DFT too. It's always great to get not just being there and getting the reminder, but also great to talk about it. I couldn't be happier.
Well, it's wonderful having you a part of it.
Play a small part in the DFT. So thank you to all of our members for joining us this evening. Thank you so much to the board members for doing what you do. Awesome job throughout the past couple of years and throughout just the length of the DFT. And I'm so looking forward to all the incoming board officers and all the work that they're going to do and all the fun things they're going to put together. So thank you, everybody. It's been a wonderful year, and it's just going to keep 2022 is going to be another wonderful year at the Detroit Film Theater. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.